Welcome, good afternoon. My name is Michael Joffe. I just started at Barracuda Networks as a public cloud architect. My previous experience is in network security, mostly working for different vendors, consultancy companies, integrators, or internet providers. So with a main focus on network security. Is it not working like this? Yeah, that's my. Thank you very much. Yeah, the session is in English because we were told it was an international audience. It's being fed on the web as well, so therefore. Where to start? The public cloud. I'm just focusing on security in the public cloud, obviously. I suppose that you guys are familiar with Azure in general. In the public cloud, we're talking about mainly mainly workloads. So whether it's a web application, developer platform, or an application, it's moved to the cloud, and obviously we deal with additional security issues, let's say, for connectivity towards the cloud, securing the cloud itself, outbound traffic. So I'm going to focus on that. I'll just start with a survey as an introduction. Barracuda commissioned an independent company to lead a survey, a global survey. The impression it's going away again. There you go. Yeah. It's my big ears. Check. Yeah, there you go. So yes, we commissioned a survey in order to figure out how companies deal with the cloud nowadays, the public cloud. This was a global survey, as I said, with about 1,300 companies worldwide, of which 550 were in EMEA. So I'll just focus on that. Technical problem. We'll get rid of it. There you go. Much better. Yeah. Okay. We have sound. So the survey was conducted in May and June 2017, not too long ago. The companies range between 500 and 10,000 employees in different market sectors: IT, retail, manufacturing, financial services, public sector, energy, etc. I'm not going to go in every detail of these slides. They'll be available online, and I don't want to give you the death by PowerPoint vibe. So the use of public cloud is also on a rise. It's not an exponential one, it's a linear rise, but currently around 35% of the interrogated, of the companies, organizations that took part in this survey are actually using the public cloud. In 2 years' time, around 50%, and in 5 years' time, 62%. Belgium and the Netherlands are quite leading in this case, in the whole survey, if you look at the countries, with 41%. But both countries have a history of being, let's say, tech savvy, where we like to get into new technology, whereas countries like the UK or France or Germany are a bit more rigid, maybe. But they're great markets for us. I mean, the percentage is low. The UK is just at 29%, but in numbers, it's a huge market for both Azure as Barracuda Networks. It might have been the questions in the survey that led to that as well. So public cloud usage, what is it mostly used for? 77% data storage, data recovery at 56%. So that's a lot of focus on the data itself. And it also includes sensitive data. 48% of employees' personal data, 42% of business intellectual property, 40% of bank details. So that obviously raises a lot of questions on how it's being secured, what is being done for security. Obviously, the platforms, whether it's Azure, AWS, Google, whatever, they offer a set of security measures, but they're mainly focusing on securing the cloud itself and not what's happening in the cloud. And that's one of the platform misconceptions that a lot of organizations have. And aside from reputation and any kind of issues that you might have when sensitive data of your company is exposed, we also have the GDPR that's coming up, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. It's an enforcement of rules that it forces companies to protect their data, and this will be enforced in May 2018. If aside from a breach, for example, where your customer data is out there, you'll also get fined if such a thing happens. So very important as well. What's very unclear to organizations is that they don't always understand their responsibility, because it's a shared responsibility model in the cloud. Obviously, it's not just well, the platform takes care of some security, but what you're landing in the cloud, you need to take care of that. And there's a confusion there, as 61% of the organizations were under the impression that they fully understood their responsibilities. Might be true, but still that's just 60%, which was fairly evenly matched across countries. And if you look at those other figures right there, 64% of the organizations that took part in this survey believed that the customer data in the public cloud was secured by the platform. So that's already an alarm bell, I would say. Almost the same thing for applications in the public cloud. 61% thought that Azure would fully take care of that. Operating systems, patching, etc. It's, yeah, there's still some work to do. But there's obviously a worry about cloud security, as there's been already plenty of attacks and people believe they'll be attacked again. So 60% has been attacked, 26% believe it will happen again. I'm not going to go into detail for everything, but this fear basically stalls projects. People are afraid that data will get out there, and this survey was done before all the ransomware scandals showed up in the media and everywhere. So these figures will probably be different if the survey would have been done today. The precautions, yes, it's an important thing as well. Companies are taking precautions, and as it's stated over there, over half of them have already invested in additional security products. And not every organization needs additional security. Some organizations just, depending on the workloads they have in the cloud, they don't need additional security except from what is offered by the platform. But that's something to investigate. Obviously, it's good to look into it and to make that evaluation. Obviously, both Microsoft and Barracuda Networks can help companies in making this evaluation and figure out whether they need more security or not, security measures basically. What's also interesting, Azure offers the Azure Security Center, which is able to make a scan of the entire public cloud instance, and that will give you a good indication of whether you need extra security, a third party to offer you security measures, or whether the portfolio offered by Azure is sufficient. Let's move on to the next one. A good overview of what's happening. There are a lot of scans happening in the public cloud. Usually when you deploy a server on premise in your data center, you already have security in place in a secure setup. You install a new server, everything is already locked before it's even up, and afterwards you open some specific ports, or for a specific application you open some you open up the access to that new server or new application. Whereas in the cloud, well, it can be done obviously, but there's a lot more going on scan-wise, but you do need to pass traffic, else your cloud doesn't really have any added value. Obviously, almost every organization agrees on the cloud benefits. I guess 1% didn't understand the question, but yeah, it's the scalability, cost savings, etc., etc. Less maintenance. It's just faster than it used to be on premise. Let's put it that way. So this slide is actually essential for what I'm going to say today. I've kind of mentioned it already, where the public cloud vendor is taking care of the security of the cloud, whereas you or the organizations need to take care of the security controls in the cloud. I have an example on this. I've been working at a large bank in the Netherlands for most of this year, working on deploying Azure for their network. And we've spent a lot of time together with Microsoft and the bank's CISO and risk assessment organization and the network architect. We spent a lot of time on defining the security controls, as in any measure, any security building block that needs to be taken care of for specific workloads needed to be defined and in place. And these building blocks can be applied. For example, if you want to deploy a sandbox environment, a test environment in Azure where no company data is being used and it's just a low-risk environment with a risk rating of 333, then obviously we didn't need any additional controls. We just used what was offered by the platform, and we made sure that when a VM was deployed, it was patched, that it had antivirus installed, and well, identity and access management was not really necessary. But that's just the example of the lowest risk deployment. And when you really want to deploy your applications and customer data, then both Microsoft and Barracuda can help you with figuring that out, what is needed. And our services for Barracuda Networks are really focused on enabling this part. We're an enabler of securing what's within your cloud. And well, I've left the other vendors right there because it's not a problem or anything. It's something. It's a standard setup for every cloud vendor, cloud provider, Azure, AWS, Google, etc. They all follow the same model. So it's not a weakness or anything from Azure's side. So here's the main portfolio for Barracuda Networks in the cloud. I'll start with the email security gateway. It's not a big focus for us, as it's basically the same product as what we have on premise, but it's a VM version of that. So people who are used to our email security gateways, they purchase that. But what's way more popular is our SaaS version of this, so which is called Barracuda Essentials. That's more popular for securing your Office 365. And so therefore, I'll just focus on the Web Application Firewall and the Next Gen Firewall. So Web Application Firewall for securing your web servers or your internet-facing applications, and the Next Gen Firewall for security and connectivity. I'll start out with the WAF. We're inspecting inbound and out. Oh, I'll just make this finish up. I think that's it. Yeah. No, go back. We're inspecting inbound traffic, outbound traffic. We will protect against the top 10 OWASP attacks. We're also offering application DDoS. So obviously the platform is catching most of the DDoS attacks, but there's a gray area basically regarding DDoS, and there's also some DDoS attacks on an application level. which we're able to protect against. Proactive defense, that's a very interesting one, I think. We cloak the application. So if, for example, someone wants to hack a web server, it's nice to know what kind of web server, what is running there, what version, etc., etc. And we're cloaking that, we're hiding it so that you can't see it, obviously. Geo-IP, that's a region-based correlation of traffic. So if your customer base is in the Netherlands and suddenly there's a peak in traffic from South America, then obviously it's a bit suspicious. So that will trigger some alerts. Obviously, these are all features you can configure, use or not use, but yeah, if it's there, why not use it? So for outbound inspection, we have another interesting feature, which is for the data loss prevention. We scan for credit card numbers or social security numbers, BSN numbers, for example. And if it's found in the traffic, we will just replace, for example, for credit cards. Yeah. It's like, yeah. So yeah, we replace part of the credit card number with little stars, and you only see the last 4 digits. These 2 little icons here are small but very important. It's a lot of added value from Barracuda. There's authentication and access control, so we can work with, for example, Active Directory to authenticate users. So not all inbound traffic or outbound traffic is allowed. Logging and reporting also essential because you want to know what's going on and redefine your configuration and make sure that it's well configured, basically. We integrate with Azure Security Center, OMS. So also we work well together with Splunk or ArcSight. So all logging and reporting, the overview is there. Very, yeah, important, I would say. The use cases, mainly mentioned them pretty much all. There's application security against cross-site scripting, application DDoS. The Azure integration, so we integrate with Active Directory, ADFS. There's an example for that where a customer was getting DDoSed on its Active Directory federation, and the WAF can do like a pre-authentication, basically. So if a DDoS is performed on your Active Directory federation, then we will stop it. Load balancing, we're doing layer 7 load balancing, and we're also able to route traffic based on application, not just IP and source IP, destination IP, and port number, but also on application. And others. Data loss prevention, I just mentioned that inbound and outbound traffic is filtered for or scanned for sensitive data. This is our typical positioning in the cloud for the web application firewall. So right there, there's the Azure Load Balancer for redundancy or high availability, which could work with 2 nodes. They all have the same configuration. It's actually working as one whole. But in order to show that it's auto-scaling, I drew 4 of them right there, so it can scale up and down. It's just as dynamic as your server farm behind it. So when you need more, when the load gets bigger, when you need more pass-through bandwidth, then we can adapt to that. And there's obviously a pay-as-you-go model and a licensed model, as in financial. On to the next-gen firewall. These are the most common use cases. We offer VPN connectivity, so site-to-site VPN. quite classic for on-premise firewalls, but it's not always present in among our competitors. The multi-tier architecture, we're able to segregate between tiers within a VNet and really separate just segregate the tiers basically. Express route, we offer more visibility for express route, and we also offer traffic control, so inbound, outbound, deep inspection, and traffic control based on application, URL, antivirus, and users. And this is quite a unique feature as well, the access to resources. We're the only vendor who offers SSL VPN in the cloud, and you can also connect to the cloud via client-to-site VPN. We also have a VPN client as a separate product. Let's move on to customer use cases. I have a few examples, 3 examples of customers and how we deployed our next-gen firewall and web application firewall products. So agriculture services, this is a company in the Netherlands that offers services to the agricultural sector. To just name one silly example, for example, if a farmer needs more seeds, he can just use a portable device and place his order via this instance in the public cloud. So the challenge here is that we needed to deploy different services, different zones with different levels of risk. The user should be able to access the network from both inside the corporate network and outside the network. Logging visibility and centralized control is also essential. I didn't mention it yet. We also have a tool to manage firewalls. And while the web application firewall has a graphical user interface, but the next-gen firewall has that as well. Plus, if you manage more than, I don't know, 4 or 5 clusters, it becomes a bit of a pain to manage. So you want to use our command central to manage more than that. And an example of that is the Postbank in Germany, which has over 2,000 of our firewalls. Behind each PIN machine, they have a next-gen firewall instance. So they're managing that from a central command center, control center. Obviously, in Azure, you can deploy easily. You have ARM templates in order to configure devices without having to do it manually. So that's another story, but I just wanted to focus on the centralized control, that we have those features well in place. So what we did here is we deployed a next-gen firewall to secure the communication from the headquarters, and we deployed an NGF to separate zones, and we created a DMZ in Microsoft Azure. So this is the high-level network design. It's also pretty much our reference design. I'll just fast forward to these flows right there. So obviously, if traffic comes from a branch office or main office, or from separate external users, or maybe employees logging in via VPN, the traffic will go to this firewall tier first. Unless it's to access web applications, they will be directed to the web application firewall cluster first, or the WAF tier, and then traffic will be rerouted to the next-gen firewall cluster in order to reach whatever tier is needed to be reached. With UDR, user-defined routing, it's set up in such a way that you can't just send traffic in between tiers. Everything is filtered by the firewalls or the web application firewall if it's inbound, outbound traffic where it's needed, basically. It's all defined in user-defined routing. Let's see. The next example is a healthcare insurance company, a big one in the Netherlands as well. 16,000 employees, so you can pretty much guess which one it is. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to disclose that, so I'll just keep it to myself. What they basically wanted was to have a development portal for external staff. So they had this idea of deploying that in Azure, as it's more scalable and easier to allow access for non-corporate employees. So they needed to arrange remote desktop services for this external staff, and they were also concerned about outbound traffic from these remote desktops. As in, for example, they're using Visual Studio to develop their applications, and there's also obviously a set of tools or programs, applications they're allowed to use within this organization. And if said developer wants to use some tool that he finds practical but is not allowed by this company, then they need to make sure that he can't download it on the remote desktop, or that he can't download other or access other areas that are not permitted. Finally, the remote desktop services need to be secured. That's a no-brainer. For the deployment, we used Next-Gen Firewall for outbound filtering, and the remote desktop services to secure that. We used the Web Application Firewall, and we also applied traffic inspection on the Next-Gen Firewall, obviously. Gets a little more complex. We have two separate VNets, basically, the access layer and data layer. And in order to link them together, we've set up a VPN tunnel with our own proprietary TINA protocol. So it's not IPsec. And this crosses regions, which is, I think, unique. Over here, actually, this is a zoomed out version of what you saw previously, the reference design, with also a firewall tier, WAF tier, remote desktop gateway tier, and an infra tier. And the reason they wanted this separation is because if anything happened, any kind of breach, they wanted to shut down this tunnel and not have the data layer, which contained the databases, be available to anyone, and then figure out what went wrong and what's going on and try to fix things. So the only link to the on-premise setup is just a tunnel for management. So there's basically nothing, no traffic going between the on-premise corporate network and the cloud-based setup. And the last example is a gaming company in France. They had this challenge that they expected a lot of traffic during the Euro 2016. So they wanted to temporarily deploy a lot of web services, and they didn't want to invest into hardware, as that would lead them to just leaving those servers running for no reason, or just be stuck with metal and plastic. That's why they chose to deploy in Azure. The databases needed to remain in-house, so for compliance reasons. So we needed to have a secure connection set up between Azure and the data center, and it needs to be fast. This connection, accelerated, prioritized traffic. We need to apply quality of service. So what we've deployed is a Next-Gen Firewall in Azure. And on premises, we also had to deploy a Next-Gen Firewall in order to set up this proprietary TINA VPN protocol over ExpressRoute. So this is the design for that. Let's see where to start. One of the focus here is quality of service, and with our TINA protocol, we're able to set up 24 transports, up to 24 transports between two peer gateways. For example, we can use that for failover, and we can also use that for quality of service. So for example, if you have backups running, you don't need any speed. I mean, there can be some latency in that. It's not that relevant. So you'd want to push the database backups over the tunnel that goes over the internet, and anything that involves users, active users, anything that cannot allow any latency, you want to go over the prioritized route, over express route, and we're able to filter this traffic based on the classic source, destination, and service, but also on application, time, URL, and in our latest release, we're also able to separate traffic based on the load. So if, for example, you have a 100 Mbit line and 50 is being used, there are some triggers going on in order to make sure that there's enough bandwidth for your most important traffic. What is also good to notice is that this customer already had an infra in place, so internet router, MPLS routers. They also had a firewall set up, a cluster. So they didn't really need an additional firewall in their network. But this next-gen firewall that is on-premise from Barracuda is just set up as a VPN concentrator behind their firewall. And we also have the option of running that on a VM, just on a server. So you don't have to turn your whole infrastructure upside down just to have this protocol running. And that gets me to almost the end of this session. I'd just like to let you know that there are videos on our website that have high-level information or more techie information. We also have webinars. You need to subscribe to, you need to log in campus.barracuda.com, and it's free, and you can follow webinars and actually ask questions if you have them. And also I'll just refer you to the videos, because it's mainly the same thing. It's just that the webinars are more up to date on specific themes, on specific subjects, and after a while they're posted as videos anyway, so you'll find them there. Technical briefs, white papers, everything is there to be accessed, all for free. You can contact us right there. The slide will be available via TechDays, so I don't know where, but it will be publicly available. There's also a 30-day free trial from the marketplace in Azure. And temporarily, we've extended that to 90 days. So for 90 days, you can deploy the firewall and check it out. Yeah, if needed, we can give you a demo, proof of concept setup, WebEx session where we can show the product and how it works to your organization or whoever needs to be informed on this. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much, and please let me know if you have any questions, or we also have a booth downstairs where you can just ask us anything you want. We have some goodies left, I hope, because they went pretty quick, but yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much.